I'm Faith.
And I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Mr. Sharp from Turner Schools Radio.
We'll be interviewing 5 people who are standing for election to be the MP for Folkestone and Hythe.
Today we're joined by Tony Vaughan from the Labour Party. Welcome to Turner Schools Radio.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Briefly tell us about yourself.
I grew up at Hythe in Hertfordshire, which is about half an hour up the north of King's Cross on the train, and quite liked school. My mum came from the Philippines in the 70s and worked in our NHS and looked after old people. My dad was working in sales and got into university, studied law, and I've been a barrister for the last 17 years. So I've been representing people on all sorts of issues and trying to get justice for people. I've been involved in the Labour Party here since about 2017. But over time, over a group of great people who have been active here, we've got to the point where Labour has been second in the last 2 general elections, and I've really enjoyed working with the team of people here in Folkestone and Hythe. I lived here since 2014, where we moved down from London, and I lived in Sandgate. Lived there for nearly 9 years until 2022 and live in Canterbury now, but I've been constantly down here working with the Labour councillors and really kind of laying foundations for hopefully we'll see some improvement in Labour's share of the vote here at this election, hopefully win it.
If you win the election, what are Labour's priorities?
The first one is making sure that the economy will grow, because everything else is based on there being enough money for paying for all of the things that we need. And so economic stability and economic growth are really the foundation of what we have to have, because there is there is a lot of challenges that we face in this area. We've had 14 years of budget cuts and public services not working and all sorts of national level problems as well as local problems. And a lot of that comes back to how strong is the economy performing. And Brexit, which was a huge mistake, has caused our economy to go backwards. Sorting that out and getting us back on an even keel is one of the big priorities. Making sure that our streets are safe and we can go out at night and not feel worried about what's going to happen to us or antisocial behaviour. I hear a lot of people, business owners in the town, who say we've got people who are causing all sorts of problems, graffiti and rubbish and noise. Part of that is because neighbourhood policing, which is where there's a policeman in your area, that has massively reduced under the Conservatives. So one of the things that Labour would do is restore neighbourhood policing so we can really crack down on antisocial behaviour. A massive thing is obviously our health service. It's very difficult for people to get a GP appointment, a dentist. Hospital waiting lists are through the roof. There are people waiting in pain, in large part coinciding with the Conservative government we've had over the last 14 years, where we've had waiting lists at record lows in 2010 when Labour left office to record highs now. And it's not just waiting lists, it's the complete failure of social care. And so sorting out the NHS is one of Labour's massive priorities. There's obviously a lot of concern about illegal migration. One of the big things that Labour's saying it would do is stop wasting millions of money and giving it to a foreign country, which is Rwanda, and use those millions to make a proper border security command, which uses our intelligence services, our world-class intelligence services, to get inside those criminal gangs, get intelligence, make proper prosecutions and smash those criminal gangs. Labour is also totally committed to sorting out our schools and making sure there's proper funding for schools. Labour's going to support people whether they want to study in technical subjects or go to university, but make sure that there is the ability to study up to the age of 21. At the moment, if you leave at 16, you're kind of to some extent left out on your own. There's a whole load of things that everyone can do and excel in. And we really need to, the longer you have, let loads of people who are involved in education say to me, we just need to give young people a bit longer to kind of find what they want to do the kind of courses that they want to do, so that they're then better able to compete in the job market.
Miss Cantor from Folkestone Academy asked how you would stop our rivers and sea being polluted by sewage.
Thanks for the question. This is obviously a hugely important issue, and it's one that I've done a lot of work on here locally for several years. It is an utter outrage that we have so much sewage being put into the sea, and I have organised several events, protests on the beach, about 4 of them I think, over the last couple of years, where we have tried to raise the profile of the issue so people are aware of it. What Labour will do is quite simple. It will crack down on the water companies who are not performing and will make sure that criminal charges are faced personally, not just to the company, but to individual water bosses if they don't get their act together and if they don't clear up our rivers and seas. At the moment, you can have a criminal prosecution of a company, but that is just a faceless entity which simply has to give some of their money to the state. That is not a deterrent at all. And we saw that with Southern Water being fined £91 million in 2020-21 for deliberately discharging sewage into the sea. It hasn't changed its behaviour after that, in the sense that we're still seeing massively high levels of sewage discharge, to the extent that in 2023 we had the highest ever discharges in England, and in particular in Kent, where we have two, in Folkestone and Hythe, two beaches, St Mary's Bay and Littlestone, where there are no swim warnings. One example is in Hythe and Sandgate. You have very high discharges from one particular wastewater treatment works. Nobody has been shaming them into action. And I would say that as your MP, I would be banging the table very hard to make sure that Southern Water pulls their finger out, fixes the wastewater treatment works that are not fixed, so we can actually swim in the sea and not have this situation.
Mr. Murphy, the head of Turner Schools, wants to know how you'd improve the education system for children living in poverty.
There are lots and lots of issues here. One issue that I see quite a lot, and this applies both to people who are living in poverty and people who don't, but there has been an entire collapse in the system for special needs support in Kent. And it is entirely because of the way that Kent County Council has mismanaged that particular service. And so if you have a referral for a neurodiversity assessment, for the most part, you have to fight tooth and nail to get those extra measures put in, maybe even have to go and get a lawyer. There are then issues about how it's rolled out and whether there's the money to do that. So we have a system where there are people not getting the assistance that they need. Often, but not always, those people are not coming from households with a ton of money flying around. And it means that people end up not achieving their potential. That all comes from Kent County Council. And that is a council that is run by, currently, the Conservatives. There is an election next year which will essentially determine how those issues are dealt with. The reason why I turn my fire on Kent is because Kent has been especially bad on SEND, to the extent that central government has had to intervene and put it in special measures on that issue.
OK, so the Lib Dems say they'd provide tutoring for every disadvantaged pupil, giving disadvantaged early years children extra free hours as well, and also give maintenance grants to disadvantaged university students. For parents, can you provide something as attractive as that?
Well, Labour will certainly invest in early years for sure. I mean, at the moment, the childcare offering basically favours one parent working and one parent staying at home. Part of Labour's offer will be making sure that there is childcare, that there will be certainly breakfast clubs free for everybody, and early years that goes much further than the current provision. One of the kind of big themes in Labour's manifesto is breaking down the barriers to opportunity. And what that means is trying to make sure that some of the advantages you get if you come from a household that perhaps has a bit more money are made available to everybody. And so your life chances are not based on the accident of your parents' position. But that will involve making available a whole range of measures. But as I said, one of them is supporting people to study up to the age of 21, whatever they want to be doing, and whether it's kind of technical or whether it's more university focused. There isn't a specific proposal around tutoring. The reality is that the underlying inequalities in society kind of bleed their way into the schools. And so we need to properly fund schools and education so that we are giving kids a proper start in life.
How will you sort out the cost of living crisis, in particular rent and energy bills?
We've seen huge rises in the energy bills over the last couple of years. One of the reasons for that is that we've had to buy our energy and gas from dictators like Vladimir Putin, who has started an illegal war in Ukraine. And because our infrastructure has not allowed us to be self-sufficient and making our own energy, we've had to rely on people like him for our energy. And, if he decides to put the price up, then we've got to pay it. And so one of Labour's big policies is creating a publicly owned energy company called Great British Energy, which is going to focus on renewable sources of energy. It will also, for the time being, because we can't make enough energy out of renewables and solar and wind, it will invest in new nuclear so that we can transition to the kinds of technologies that will give us carbon-free power. And so that will mean that over the long term, people's bills won't be going up and down in that huge kind of variations that we've seen. So we have what we call energy security. Now, rents and mortgages as well have gone up through the roof since the Liz Truss mini budget of a year and a half ago. That was partly because that Tory government wanted to cut taxes by essentially borrowing more money. What we call an unfunded tax cut, utterly ridiculous. And that has resulted in mortgage rates going through the roof. Now, rents are also high, and part of that is because all governments have not built enough houses. One of Labour's big manifesto commitments on that is building more houses, including more social housing.
Can I just jump in there and ask a question about housing locally?
Yeah.
The Otterpool development of thousands and thousands of homes looks like it's going ahead. What would Labour do that would change the housing stock around here apart from Otterpool?
Well, there will be more housing, and that will result, in addition to Otterpool, and that will be partly as a result of Labour changing planning rules, so that the idea which we often see where a house needs to be built, or a builder asks for planning permission to build a house, and people kick it out for sort of technical reasons, when actually that housing is needed. Labour's going to change planning rules, so that kind of barrier to building houses is changed. Another thing that Labour will do, and this is perhaps more of a local thing, there is a lot of housing in this area that is just sitting there empty. There is housing where perhaps you have a landlord who lives in another country. There are powers that the council could be using to buy that house, or to require that person to rent them out, or even for the council to buy the house and then divide it up into flats. There's all sorts of things the councils can do to use the houses that are already there. I mean, there's a site on Ship Street, for example, in Folkestone, that could be redeveloped. It's not the policy of the current Green administration to do that, but it is something that Labour has been pressing for, so that you can use existing what we call brownfield sites, that is, sites that we used for industry perhaps in the past, to actually make housing on there that local people can use.
What will you do to reduce NHS waiting times?
NHS waiting times have just gone through the roof under this Conservative government, and the specific commitment that Labour is making is that they would use the money that Labour would gain from tackling tax avoidance, so that's stopping people like non-DOMs and other people who have used tax loopholes to get around the paying of tax, to get that money in and use it to use private capacity within the NHS to put thousands more appointments delivered to patients every week, so that you can cut the backlog and ensure that the capacity that already exists in other parts of the system, albeit in the private sector, are used to cut NHS waiting lists, so that everybody can access the appointments they need, not just if they have the money to do so.
So all the major parties have been criticised by the Institute for Fiscal Studies recently, an organisation that studies finance and the economy. It said that on current forecasts, I'm talking about Labour policy here, there's literally no room for any more spending than planned by the current Conservative government. Now, people support Labour because they think it will deliver better public services. Many people think that. But why should people vote Labour if a body like the IFS is saying that actually not much is going to change?
OK, look, the economy has been flatlining for years. And part of that's because of Brexit. Part of that is a mismanagement of the economy. And so we've got flat growth compared to other countries. And Labour's manifesto assumes, and there's a political judgment here, that growth will increase. Now, that will be the result of all the things I've referred to. It's all there in the manifesto, but it is not the case that that there is any sort of, hiding the numbers or anything. It's very clear that if Labour's commitments to increase the size of the economy occur, then there will be money for these things. And if there is even a small amount of growth, that's going to generate tons more money. I don't think the IFS is saying anything different. It's simply perhaps highlighting, the point I've made about what perhaps the assumptions are that are underpinning the manifesto forecasts.
A lot of people locally, especially considering where we live, are concerned about illegal immigration. But talking about immigration on a slightly wider scale, do you think migration levels, legal and illegal, are too high? And if so, how does Labour propose to reduce them?
Look, there are specific issues in this area around illegal migration, which, I've referred to, and that causes a lot of concern. But I also hear a lot from farmers who need people to pick fruit. I hear that there are primary schools who may need to close in the long term because there aren't enough children that want to go to those schools, that there are population declining. And so we need to be realistic here about what what is actually going on. We need to make sure that the jobs that need to be done in this country are done by people who are here. At the same time, we need to value the skills of people who are in this country, who perhaps come here from other countries. I mean, if you've been into a hospital lately, you can see that the NHS is held up by migrant staff, and the idea that we shouldn't be, valuing their contribution is wrong. But the way that you deal with this is to look at sector by sector what the needs are of the economy, and you carefully look through and tailor the visa requirements according to what your economic needs are. And of course, the needs which come with that for families and etc. to come in. But some of these issues are blown up by those who want to scapegoat people who've come to this country and would much rather see no immigration at all. And I think those parties, or the people who think along those lines, do not represent our national interest.
Finally, something happier. In our area, the Labour Party have many councillors in local government. Pick 3 things that Labour has done for our area.
So Labour's been in charge of the town council for several years now, and every year the town council put on an incredible range of events like Armed Forces Day, music events, all sorts of things which massively benefit the local community. It gets a load of people down the town centre and onto the Leas. The second thing is something that is, I suppose, a broad point, but is not perhaps seen. There are hundreds and hundreds of emails that our councillors get every week from members of our community dealing with raising very, very serious issues, but also, even to do with litter or things that really matter to people, but perhaps don't make the headlines. And our councillors are day in, day out working really hard. And if I was elected, would also be working really, really hard to deal with those sorts of things. So, for example, somebody emailed some of our councillors yesterday saying, I went for a swim on Mermaid Beach. There was litter everywhere. This needs to be sorted out. I mean, in fact, litter is, and bins, etc., is a district council thing. But Labour councillors were on the backs of the relevant people, and that problem is being sorted out. Or an individual who emailed me who was having problems with his housing. He was disabled, living in a wheelchair. Adaptations hadn't been made by the council to the property he was in. They accepted those adaptations needed to be made. They hadn't been made. By engaging with me, and I engaged with the councillors, we managed to get him sorted, essentially, in a few days. And it's those sort of specific practical things. So that's made that guy's life, it will make that guy's life completely transformed. And that is happening every day, every week, where Labour councillors are listening to people in the community. And I suppose the third thing, and it's a national thing, but it's something that people often say is one of the greatest things of the last Labour government, and that's the national minimum wage. That has contributed, and that's helped every single person, I think, in this area. Or there will be people in this area who will have benefited from that. Before that, it was £3.50 an hour, perhaps, for doing certain jobs. And the Conservatives said it will never work, it will cause unemployment, and it will be a very bad thing. Now we're talking about increasing that to above £11 an hour. And so that is something that very much affects everybody, or everybody who was on that kind of wage, in a very, very positive way. I'm standing because I have hope that Labour in government and Labour as an alternative political force gives people hope. There is not much grounds to be hopeful under a Conservative government. We've had 14 years of failure and chaos, and we need to turn the page on that. And I really believe that Labour will give people hope. And if elected, I will use that opportunity to do my utmost to fight for the people of this area so it can be the best that it can possibly be for everybody.
Tony, Vaughan, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.